On this week's show, we're going to do things a little bit differently. Instead of focusing on another artist, I thought I'd tell you my story. Welcome to Charlie's Open Mic. My name is Charlie Mosbrook. On this week's show, I'm going to tell you my story, and I'm going to tell you about an event that happened 10 years ago that was deeply meaningful to me. It was a gesture made by a lot of musician friends, some of which you've seen on this show, let's just tell you the whole story. Let me take you back to the beginning. My earliest musical memories begin as a small child. My dad, who is a journalist, worked with TV for well over 30 years and radio, was also a huge jazz nut. He's a jazz historian. He's written a book on the subject. He has been doing a radio show for over 30 years on jazz history in Cleveland. I always remember jazz being a part of our life. There was always jazz music in the house. I also remember as a small child my mom getting a guitar and teaching herself folk songs. I remember Jim Croce's songs, and I remember the Mockingbird song. And I remember this time that I would spend with her where she was singing me these little songs and I'd sing with her. And it just being the most loving, nurturing environment I can remember as a small child. So those are my early musical memories. Later on in life, as a teenager, I started getting into the Rolling Stones and The Who and Bob Dylan. And I started going to a youth group. And in that youth group, I got involved in clown ministry. I was a goofy kid. I loved goofing around. I liked getting a laugh. I was a performer very early on, and I didn't really know it. My youth minister, Bob, he saw this in me, and he pulled me into the clown ministry, and we would work out these routines. We would go down to the local hospitals and perform for kids who were undergoing cancer treatments and whatever else was going on in their life. It became a very fulfilling part of my life. I really enjoyed going and performing for these little kids. At the same time, I was involved in a youth center in Cleveland Heights called Rap Art, and we would go there and we would get involved in counseling. We would have group counseling and individual counseling. We were also able to get involved in different artistic endeavors. I was in a drama group. I was also in a band. You could do pottery, you could paint, you could do whatever you wanted. So they combined the therapy with the arts. In the music group that I was a part of, I played bass. And the guy who oversaw that program asked me if I would do my clown routine for one of the music nights. So I turned to Bob, the youth minister, and I asked if we could put together a routine for that show, and we thought it should be musical. And we weren't really quite sure how we'd fit the bass into it. So he gave me this little goofy guitar. It was basically a toy, but he taught me a few chords, and we wrote a little song that would become the centerpiece of that routine. I fell in love with the idea that I could sit down and take poetry I had written, and I found a lot of my poetry was really based rhythmically on those Who and Rolling Stones and Bob Dylan songs, and I could turn them into songs of my own. In the middle of all this, my librarian at Cleveland Heights High School introduced me to a book called Bound for Glory by Woody Guthrie. And she introduced it to me because I enjoyed John Steinbeck and I enjoyed Bob Dylan. And she thought, well, this is perfect. Woody Guthrie, oh man, that just blew my mind. I wanted to live that life. After high school, I ventured off into the world. I remember going to Madison, Wisconsin and living there for about a year and playing street music and writing these songs and going down to Chicago and playing in the subways there and New Orleans and New York and Memphis and anywhere I could go and just play music. I returned to Cleveland in the late 80s, early 90s. Started working at a coffee shop where I had worked previously as a teenager. And the owner came in one night and he said, hey, what can we do to make Mondays a little more popular? I said, why don't we try an open mic? Because I had been doing those in Madison and Chicago. And he said, that's a good idea, you do it. I had no idea what I was doing, but a bunch of people were willing to help me figure it out. We started doing this open mic, and it was a big hit. The whole neighborhood embraced it. We'd fill the room every Monday. When we could go outside in the summers, we would have 300-400 people out there enjoying these open mics. They were a big hit. They were a good time. I made so many friends, in the music community. A lot of acts that ended up being big would begin at these open mics. Well, after that coffee shop closed in 2001, I sort of found myself floating. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I decided to go to school for the recording arts. I got a really cool internship with a local record company called Telarc International. I started getting more involved with endurance sports, which is something I had always sort of enjoyed doing. And then I found a new open mic location at the Coventry Phoenix, which was just down the street. And that's the last place I did open mic before the pandemic began. Everything was going pretty well. We were doing our music, we were doing sports. Life was good. And then out of nowhere, I started experiencing something I'd never felt before in my body. And as an endurance athlete, you really do understand your body very well. You understand every ache and pain. You monitor everything constantly. I mean, that's what you're doing when you're out running. You're monitoring everything as though you were checking all the lights in the dashboard of the car. And I was experiencing feelings that I'd never experienced before. A loss of balance, sort of a tingling sensation, and my feet felt like they were frozen. I couldn't balance. I couldn't stand up with my own power. I didn't know what was going on. I was freaked out. Eventually, a friend of mine spotted some of my movements, and he said, "Hey, you need to go see a neurologist." So I did. What the neurologist told me was that I had experienced a spinal cord injury. We did a bunch of MRIs and X-rays to try to figure out what was wrong. And when we finally did, they decided they needed to do some surgery to go and correct the problems. The problem was that the discs in between my vertebrae were starting to break apart and then to hit the spinal cord, causing irreversible damage. To prevent damage from increasing and becoming worse to the point where my heart would stop working, we had to go in there with a surgical procedure, clean out the bad pieces, replace them with something, and then fuse it all together. They used a titanium plate to hold the vertebrae together. So while all this is happening, my fingers are tingling, they're numb. I can't feel these fingers. Currently, I really can't feel these fingers very well. They told me during the surgery that there was a chance I could lose my voice because the vocal nerve was so close to the area that they were going to be working. I was freaked out, and I was worried that I was going to lose my songs. I started reaching out to a couple of friends and saying, "Hey, would you record some of these songs for me so that they are documented, so there's a history of these songs existing?" My friends all of a sudden started responding very quickly. Yes, yes, yes. They all wanted to do it. They started picking out the songs they were going to record. They started making time in studios or recording at home. A couple of them came over to my place, and we recorded on my setup. And it was really this beautiful, amazing thing. I was watching this go down, and I realized I had this collection now of these beautiful songs. And I started asking some of these friends, what should we do with these things? And they said, let's make a CD. So we did. And this is the CD. It's called Coverage. It's a collection of all those recordings and all those friends. And it came out 10 years ago this month. That's why I'm talking about it tonight, because it was a really special moment in my life. And it was really special how my friends, they turned out to really help me through this difficult, dark time in my life. And the past 10 years since then has really been beautiful in so many different ways. I mean, obviously what we're going through as a nation right now is terrifying and scary. But aside from national politics, my life has been generally pretty good. That brings me to where we are now. As a culture, things seem dark. Things seem almost hopeless in a lot of ways. I mean, there's a little bit of hope, but we're going into this week with, for me, it's a lot of fear, a lot of concern about what's going to happen and where this is going to lead us and how are we going to respond and rebound and get through this. And I think we just need to keep doing what we're doing. We need to keep reaching out to each other and trust each other to lift each other up through these terrible moments. That's what happened for me when I went through my spinal cord injury. My friends stepped up and they lifted me through that moment. It was a beautiful thing. The record is beautiful, and I think we can do that again. So stay strong, keep your head up, and let's keep moving forward. Daddy is riding tonight on the train. He's got his daughter, she's up on his knees. He's got his money tied up in time. He's got his mind tied up in dreams. There's an angel and she's riding on the train tonight. And there's an angel and she's riding on the train tonight. Looking out of the window, he's watching the town roll by. And Daddy lays his head in his hands and lets out a sigh. There's an angel and she's riding on the train tonight. And there's an angel and she's riding on the train tonight. Looking out across the aisle, I heard the little girl sing. And Daddy's looking back with a smile for the love that she brings. There's an angel and she's riding on the train tonight. And there's an angel and she's riding on the train tonight. Thank you for watching Charlie's Open Mic this week, and thank you for letting me tell you my story and about how coverage came together and how all those artists were able to step up and help me through a really difficult time. Please hit that subscription link down below. Please ring the bell for notifications. Always click like and comment down below, and you can find us at charliesopenmic.com, where you can find a Patreon link to help support the show. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.